Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce. We have a wide range of guests. We have a couple brothers and also a doctor. So I think probably the deepest guest list ever in the history of the podcast. I want to welcome back Right Worshipful Pat Imbimbo, our Grand Beekeeper, Brother Anthony Cucci, and Dr. Jason McCarthy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You bet. I'm excited to have all of you on the panel as we get ready to talk about what we believe to be the kind of hidden gem of New York Masonry, and that's the Masonic Medical Research Institute, which is an internationally recognized biomedical research institute. It was founded by the Grand Lodge of New York in 1958. And it's hard to think that this has been a project that we know in the craft is such an established entity, but it started out kind of small. So, Brother Cucci, can you give us an overview of how the MMRI started and, of course, the impact that it's had on the Grand Lodge?
Of course. Thank you, Brother Arce, for inviting myself, Right Worshipful Imbimbo, and Dr. McCarthy to share the mission, vision, and work that's happening here at the Masonic Medical Research Institute. In 1947, Gay H. Brown was the most worshipful Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New York. And unfortunately, during that time, rheumatic diseases and rheumatic fever were quite prevalent, not only in the state of New York, but around the country and around the world. So it is the mission and vision of our craft to make a positive impact on all of humanity. And it's under that same vein that most worshipful Gay H. Brown created a foundation to fund rheumatic disease research. It was a joint project through the Grand Lodge of New York. He actually put Raymond C. Ellis as the president of that foundation, and I'll get back to Most Worshipful Ellis in a second. So they were able to pool money together to make a massive impact, millions of dollars impact in rheumatic disease research. About 10 years later, the president of that foundation, as I said, Raymond C. Ellis, became the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge. And he said, we did such a great job raising funds for rheumatic disease research laboratories. Why not take the next step and conduct the research ourselves? So in 1956, he commissioned the ground to be broke for the Masonic Medical Research Laboratory, and its doors opened in 1958. And in that time, their first research portfolio was very cardiovascular heavy. We still conduct quite a bit of cardiovascular research, which I will have Dr. McCarthy elaborate on a bit more. But that's a little bit of the origins of MMRI. We started as a foundation to fund rheumatic disease research. We grabbed that torch and ran down the field with it to become what we are today, the Masonic Medical Research Institute. Almost 65 years of medical leadership brought to you by the Masonic fraternity.
What I find amazing about the MMRI is the cardiac connection. That's where professionally I have seen publications and I'm like, oh, I know these guys. But what is also unique, and Brother Anthony and Brother Pat, we both know about the heart being a very important organ and talked about a lot in our ritual as Master Masons, but also the concept of relief and charity and how that comes into play. And I know that many brothers listening are like, oh yeah, I do hear about this either at our Grand Lodge session. We'll get a report about the MMRI. There'll be something included in the New York State Mason magazine that gets sent out that brothers will read about, or perhaps there's a presentation that's given to your lodge. But we are fortunate to have Dr. McCarthy, and I wanted to turn to you to talk about what drew you to this research institute and kind of give us an overview of what's being done there, what your work is, and the most important question is the growth that's been happening.
Yeah, certainly. So I've been doing research for quite a while now. I was actually at the Mass General Hospital for about 15 years. And so if you know anything about the MGH, it's one of the largest research hospitals in the world. Through that, I made a lot of collaborations around the world, around the country. In particular, one of my collaborators is Dr. Maria Contreras. Dr. Contreras was recruited here as the director of research back in 2017. She's now the executive director of the Institute. Maria's vision was to make the Institute a multifaceted research hub. And, to kind of expand upon our history in cardiovascular disease and bring in other researchers across the cardiovascular realm to really broaden the scope of what we do. It's kind of funny because I'm technically not a cardiovascular researcher. I do a lot of cardiovascular research, but I'm a chemist. Whereas a lot of the other faculty and scientists we recruited have been biologists. But the changeover really in 2018 was to kind of take what the Institute was based upon. So this really solid cardiovascular expertise. The interesting thing about the scientists that we brought in is that even though they're mainly cardiovascular researchers, they're not one-trick ponies. That's not all that they do. They bring with them technology and also a diverse skill set. And so we've actually, knowing that we were located in central New York, in Utica, not in a major hub like Boston, where a lot of us have come from, we actually built this in such a way that we were very synergistic. The group that we brought in, everyone's skill sets overlap. We work very, very well together. In doing so, we actually created a very strong team that is capable of doing quite a lot on our own.
I got another question about that. Listening and knowing that you're a scientist, and we talked about this before the podcast started, not a Freemason. So what was your feelings or what did you think when you learned that it was the Masonic Medical Research Institute did Freemasonry, or did you have any questions about Masons or what the connection was here, or is that pretty much already established in the scientific community?
In all honesty, when Maria had first brought the idea of being recruited here, my first question, where is Utica? So I'm born and bred Boston. So that's my home. I spent a lot of time learning how the Institute was founded, who are the people that founded it, how is it being supported? And the one thing that I've probably learned over the last 4 years about Masonry is their philanthropic bent. It's everything is for the betterment of humanity that I've seen, and it's actually been quite an amazing process over the last 4 years. So, I mean, in my position at the Institute, I speak with the board once in a while. I'm here for St. John's Day, so I'm interacting with Masons all the time, and it's just it's amazing to watch how supportive of the Institute they are.
Let's talk a little bit about the work that you do, and for brothers again that aren't getting the publications or up to date on the latest happenings. How is the work that you're doing making a difference not only in the lives of Freemasons, but in men and women all around the world?
Yeah, so my work, like I said, I'm a little bit different than everyone else here. I mean, everyone that's here for the most part is focused on molecular biology. So these are what we call pathways. And so it's kind of how the cells in your body talk to each other. Pathways are conserved throughout the body. So if you're looking at a specific pathway, say in the heart, say it's a pathway that causes fibrosis after a heart attack, and so causes the stiffening of the heart. That same pathway is applicable in other diseases, scleroderma, which is fibrosis of the skin, lung fibrosis, kidney fibrosis. I'm a builder. I make a lot of things. The first one is targeted drug delivery. I can make a little particle about 1/1000th the diameter of a human hair and decorate it so that I can get it into whatever cell in your body that I want it to go into. And the advantage of that is that when you load a drug into that particle, by targeting it to that specific cell type or that specific organ or tissue, you prevent all the extraneous side effects that can normally occur from the therapeutic that you might give. So think about, actually a perfect example is there's a chemotherapeutic called doxorubicin, which is very, very toxic when given to cancer patients. So that's kind of half of my research. And I do that in multiple different diseases. I mean, I have collaborations in regeneration of bone, transplant rejection, heart failure, heart attack, pulmonary fibrosis. We just actually recently had really cool results in Alzheimer's. The second half of what I do is called molecular imaging, and it's the ability to non-invasively see biological activity. A perfect example of this is, you go to the hospital for an ultrasound. Sometimes they use something called contrast in the ultrasound. And those are little tiny bubbles filled with this echogenic gas that causes an echo with the ultrasound. So I do that, but at a very specific level. I make probes, like we call them, that can visualize biological processes. So one example is I made a probe that when you have transplant rejection lights up. it sees this very specific enzyme. And when it sees that, it lights up and actually allows you to visualize whether or not there's a rejection in an organ that's been transplanted. An overview of where I work, I do a lot. And I am a science geek through and through. I geek out about my results. And I often go running down the hall to the other scientists when something cool comes up. And that's kind of why I do this. It's always the aha moments. And I know that, a lot of the faculty that I work with here, I mean, for instance, Zicheng Lin, who's one of the faculty right down the hall here, every time he gets a really cool data point, he does not hesitate to stop by my office on his way back just to let me know how cool it is, the stuff that he's been doing.
I think that's very cool. And I want to kind of help create value in the work that you're doing for our brothers here in New York State, because I'm sure they're listening to this and thinking, wow, there's like so many different parts of the medical world that we're touching here with this important research. And whether they've given in their lodge recently or within the past couple of years, I'm just curious if there is a major breakthrough or a success story that you are extremely proud of, or that the team at the MMRI is very proud of.
Personally, I mean, one of our collaborators has this drug that doesn't penetrate the brain very well, but he knows that it can help with Alzheimer's. And we made a particle that somehow crossed the blood-brain barrier, which is very hard to do in drug delivery. And in their experiment, all of the, so this is the looking, they have a very special model that they use, but all of the model animals were cured. Another example is, transplant rejection. We made a particle that goes to a transplant, behaves in a very specific way. And it's this dual modality kind of therapeutic. And a single injection of these nanoparticles can prevent transplant rejection, which is and at a subtherapeutic dose of any of the drugs. So it's, we're doing things which are cutting edge that have never been done before. And part that I enjoy is when my collaborators who have been in these fields forever, they're like, I can't believe you just did this. And so that's kind of, it's happens all the time here, which is kind of why it makes it worthwhile. Even seeing, all my collaborators and all of the other scientists in the building here, when they come up with these really cool findings, people that are working in COVID and looking at long COVID and finding that these interactions are occurring between the virus and the heart and stuff that hadn't been shown by others, in these big universities, we're doing it here. I mean, we are cutting edge. We have everything at our fingertips that any of these bigger universities have. Go back to the Mass General Hospital. I mean, I was there 15 years and you're tripping over each other. You're fighting for space, fighting for money, fighting for equipment. The MMRI, we built this in such a way that everything that we have is state of the art and it's at our fingertips. So it expedites everything that we do. And so the reason, if you look even over COVID, we published a ridiculous number of papers. And that is because we actually have these facilities at our disposal and it just facilitates everything that we do. And so it actually increases the rate. I mean, I've been more successful here in 4 years than I had been in 15 years at the MGH. So that is saying something.
It's amazing to think that this is all coming from, that little spot in Utica in upstate New York. Well, central New York, sorry. I'm distracted because I see an upstater to the right here on our screen, and I'm sure he's no stranger on the campus of the Masonic Care community. And I'm pretty sure they'd probably get you a place there. He's our grand beekeeper, Right Worshipful Imbimbo. It's so good to have you on, and thank you for taking a break with, we're in maple season, and you got bee season, and thanks for taking a break on the farm to come join us. Let's talk about some of the real world aspects of this. And you've been open and talking about autism with your family and your grandson. And what has drawn you to the Masonic Medical Research Institute? Why are you so giving of your time?
Well, I was appointed to the board in 2017. I really didn't know what I was getting into. And the first meeting I sat at, I'm not a doctor or lawyer, I'm an old wore out cop that turned into a farmer. And these guys are talking about stuff that I don't know nothing about. These guys are brilliant. And I don't understand, I'm learning. I know what a microscope is now. But at the very first meeting, I sat down and I wound up sitting next to Dr. Conaritas. And we started talking about family. And I told her that I had 3 autistic boys in the house and I live in the house of autism. That hit it because she was doing part of her research where she came from before in Massachusetts. She was doing autism research and she was planning on bringing on a scientist, investigator that specializes in autism. So we hit it off. So I said, okay, what's got to be done? And she says, well, first thing we need to do is raise money. I'm Italian. I got a big mouth. And I was a district deputy for 4 years before getting on the board. So I was well traveled. And I hit up a couple of places, and the Imperial Saratoga Warren Washington district, that district alone contributed over $50,000 from 12 lodges. And then New York City, there's some brothers down there that have autistic kids, and they jumped in, and I can't remember what they raised at the gala, but it was close to $20,000. To correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony. And then the Grand Secretary's Golf Tournament, they jumped on board, and they've been supporting the Autism Project for 3 years. They have just found a mutated gene in the research that a lot of families have contributed DNA to. The researchers at MMRI have isolated a gene contributing to autism that has never been discovered before.
Wow.
It's brand new to the autism research. It's a major breakthrough, and they're putting in a paper together to be published. They're verifying the information. So, and our job with autism at the MMRI is we're not looking for a cure, because there is no cure. There's no cure. You can't take someone that's autistic and go in and rewire them. Our goal is to find the cause. What causes autism? Because then if we can find a cause, we may be able to discover a prevention. And that's important for the future generations. And I will get choked up here, by the way, because I got two boys sitting right over here looking at me. It's personal for me.
I know this is the tough part, and I've heard you speak about this in Albany, and I'll tell you what, that it was when you spoke about it, it really hits home when you talk about your grandchildren and your family with autism. I'm sure we have brothers who are like, I'd like to help out, but I'd like to do more beyond just making a donation. How can I get involved like you do, Right Worshipful?
Just spread the word that we're doing top-notch research. We do need funding. It's never enough in the scientific arena. I mean, we got pieces, and Jason can talk to this. We have pieces of machinery there that are $750,000 that do one thing, but it's the top notch, and it gets the job done a lot quicker. And as vice president of the board, I'm exposed to a lot of this. I work close with Anthony. I work with Jason and some of the other scientists. I'm involved in a lot of things that I don't know what they are, but I know they're necessary. We need to raise the funds, the construction, expansion. Brothers that have kids with autism are a wide range. When I spoke about autism at the Grand Lodge, I had no idea that there was hundreds of brothers that are affected by autism, either brothers, sisters, daughters, sons, nephews, uncles, and that's where the support started rolling in. There's a lot of families affected by autism. So the things that can help us is, one, spread the word. You can get Brother Cucci. He's got pamphlets everywhere. They're stacked all over the place. He can send you all kinds of information. And of course, we need money. And I'd like to say one thing about the location of the MMRI in Utica. If we were not in Utica, and say we were in Buffalo or New York City or even Albany, the cost of operation would be double of what the cost is, because the trustees, who are great and very good to us at the MMRI, we have this office, this property doesn't cost us an arm and a leg and two eyeballs. I mean, we own the building, we maintain the building, and that's expensive too. But they provide a lot for us. We have a fantastic operation here.
I think Brother Cucci is happy to have, and we're happy to have a spokesperson and such a great representative like you, because I did want to give you a chance to talk about this, Brother Anthony. This is very unique, not just to New York that we do this, but can you kind of lean in on what makes the MMRI so unique in the United States and around the world?
Masonic Medical Research Institute conducts what I like to refer to as kitchen table science, not to diminish the level of scientific acumen, but to kind of drive home the point that these are diseases and ailments that real people talk about with their families at the kitchen table. These are not one-off genetic abnormalities. These aren't, we're not a treatment center that only 0.2% of the population would qualify for. Everybody, unfortunately, has family members in their household or in their loved ones that are affected with autoimmune disorders, with heart disease, with metabolism and diabetes. They have neurocognitive disorders such as autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia. We also research deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolisms with blood clots. These are real world medical ailments that unfortunately our brethren and their families have to discuss at the kitchen table, because that's where the families have discussions. And as all the brothers will know, we have taken certain obligations to support not only ourselves, but really make sure that all of humanity is moving in a positive direction. So Right Worshipful Imbimbo is a great standard bearer for those core tenets. And what separates the Masonic Medical Research Institute is that we're the only biomedical research entity that we know of in the world that is founded, operated, and supported by the Masonic fraternity. There are a lot of other great ones. The Shriners and the Shriners Children's Hospitals have done amazing work. The Cryptic Masons have their research laboratory. But the differences are the fraternity doesn't have a direct impact on the governance of the organization. Our board of directors members from our inception have been 100% Master Masons, full stop, and they always will be. These other entities, they financially support a lab, or the fraternity is just a, fundraising operation for the hospitals. Again, not to diminish their impact or, step on toes, but it is a little bit of a difference. Our Grand Lodge receives the direct report from the Masonic Medical Research Institute to all of the brethren. You normally have to be a big-time donor or some sort of a voting board member to receive this information from other entities. So I think that definitely sets us apart. And the fact that we have it here in New York, we should be proud to be New York State Masons. We have a top tier, and I'll say the number one senior living facility in the country that is fraternally sponsored and operated. We have the number one biomedical research entity that is founded and operated by Freemasons. We have the Masonic Library and the Grand Lodge. We have Camp Turk. We should be proud to be New York State Masons, especially with the philanthropy that we do. And I believe that the Masonic Medical Research Institute really carries that flame from the Grand Lodge of New York, not only within the 50 states of the United States, but I gave a presentation to a Royal Arch chapter in Alberta a couple of weeks ago. We have donors in Germany. I gave a tour to members of the Grand Chapter of the Royal Arch in Brazil a couple of weeks ago of MMRI. So we really are an international entity started in the cornerstone of being a Masonic entity in New York. What makes the Masonic Medical Research Institute so unique as well is the accessibility that the brethren have. Like Right Worshipful Imbimbo discussed how the autism program got off the ground. That's because of the charitable contributions from our brothers in the Saratoga, Warren, Washington districts out of Albany. These are brethren who pooled money together to start a biomedical research area. They were the grassroots funders. Normally it's pharmaceutical companies or big grants. And this is brethren from, like it's Right Worshipful Imbimbo said, doctors, lawyers, captains of industry, all the way to some that may refer to themselves as simple farmers, but are definitely much more than that. Again, that just goes with the same principle of meeting on the level. We meet on the level, we're able to support a biomedical research entity that in turn be able to produce findings and correct information for everybody in humanity on the level. We don't have to be a scientist to understand that. Also, during COVID, MMRI really stepped up to not only support our local community by analyzing over 50,000 PCR tests for our local hospital system. We also had doses of the vaccine on property because there wasn't anywhere else in the county that could hold the volume. We had the deep freezers for that. We had the only same day appointment, test, and result drive-through testing for COVID swabs in our county. So if you made an appointment at 8 a.m. and got to the facility at 8:15, you would get your results by 8:45 to get on that flight at 9:30. And we had a lot of people do that, and we were happy to be able to provide that for our local community. Dr. Contreras and the Grand Lodge under the Most Worshipful William Sardone's administration held a couple webinars for the brethren, not only in New York, but across the country, to receive accurate information from our researchers on COVID. To say we didn't have the live virus in the laboratory, but as Dr. McCarthy illustrated, we have top tier knowledge and academic acumen to understand the mechanisms of COVID-19, and we're able to dispense that information to the members that tuned into that. So MMRI really wants to have a real world impact on our research, not just have a discovery, contact a pharmaceutical company, get a big check and move on to the next thing. We want to have a real transparency impact on humanity.
One of the great things about Masonry is we, I think, have put a lot more focus on visiting the Utica campus, upstate or central state, depending on how you want to look at it. And we've always had the St. John's festivities that happen there. And now it looks like we're going to have a new tradition of a fall Grand Lodge session. Brother Cucci, if an individual brother wanted to come visit with his family, or a lodge wanted to make a visit up, and as you mentioned, you've given tours, how do we go about making that happen?
Please feel free to contact me. My information is available on the website, mmri.edu. I as well have traveled all over this great state to give presentations to lodges from Buffalo to New York City to Albany. I'm more than happy to travel and make a presentation in person or do a virtual one. We do have some colleagues down in the New York City area as well. So don't think that we won't travel to the the ends of the state to be able to disseminate this information. We definitely will. And we're always looking for lodges to, of course, support us financially, but put us in your trestle board for a program. We'd be happy to email or mail you copies of our newsletter and pamphlets to be able to be disseminated to the brethren and put out in the informational booths at all of the different lodges. I would be happy to send some of the video recordings that we've done of interviews and commercials and different information about the Research Institute to send out to your members. I know there's always masters who are looking to keep those brethren who have kind of strayed away from the lodge a little bit, especially since COVID, to be able to bring them back in. And, it's finding that topic that brings the brothers back into the lodge. Some are looking for historical aspects, some are looking for more esoteric, and some of them are looking for philanthropic organizations and entities to make a real impact in. And I believe that the Masonic Medical Research Institute is in the number one spot for that. So any sort of way that you'd like information to be disseminated, from a lay presentation from myself just on MMRI to some pretty hard-hitting, deep information that Dr. McCarthy and other researchers would be happy to disseminate as well. So we're more than willing to work with the lodge, district, or grand jurisdiction to get that done.
This has been the Craftsman Online podcast. I want to thank my guests this week for joining me, Dr. Jason McCarthy, Right Worshipful Pat Imbimbo, and Brother Anthony Cucci. Thank you all for coming on.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As with all of our shows, if you're looking for contact information or links to visit the MMRI, we're going to have that in our show links. Plus, shameless plug, I'm going to get a link on there for Brother Imbimbo's farm, because I've got the best hand lotion made with that bee honey. Reminder, we have a website too if you're looking for Masonic education. That's craftsmanonline.com. New episodes of our podcast, they're available for download every Monday morning. Until next time, be well.